I've worked 10 years for a regional development agency in the area of northeast from Montreal, Quebec for 10 years. And during that commitment, a provincial employment agency issued labor forecasts showing that in a matter of 5 to 10 years, some 5,000 positions in our region, both in the public and private sectors, would have to be filled just by analyzing the effect of the baby boomers' retirement wave. And we didn't know where these people would come from. So in shock, we suddenly realized that the birth rate had long ago gone under the natural population increase, that educated youth were migrating out for career opportunities, and that immigrants remained concentrated in the nearby metropolis. All of this was clearly affecting our economic sustainability and vibrancy, with consequences on social development. School had started to close in some villages, along with groceries. Small family-run enterprises which had not invested in technical upgrades were unable to withstand competition or had difficult finding specialized labor. This was a sober wake-up call, especially for the regional development planning body that we were. We had absolutely no population renewal strategy to address these issues, which were now crystallizing. Nor did the provincial government, out of promoting, without success, thank you, immigration settlement outside of Montreal. Oh, is it on? Let's see if it works. Okay. So, the general context of my research is that amidst a global population growth in Canada, mainly due to immigration, with an average of 250,000 immigrants admitted each year, we observe a population decline in smaller and remote areas. For example, evidence has shown that half of Canadian cities under 250,000 have declined between 1996 and 2001. Conversely, during the last decade, newcomers settled at 90% in the 11 biggest census metropolitan areas, of which 75% in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Regarding methodology, out of reminding that my observations stem from an exploratory literature review, I will only mention that regionalization and related content is very spread out among social science disciplines. By the way, when I use the term regionalization, I mean the process of managing immigration settlement policies in a decentralized way, and also the effort of promoting settlement outside of the big cities. And for the purpose of this presentation, in the interest of time, I aggregated data through only 5 of the 9 themes that I reported in my paper, and I will skim through them so we can spend more time on the main findings and discussions. Starting with regional growth, it is noteworthy to mention that its drivers are poorly understood and the variables sometimes spurious. Nevertheless, from an economic standpoint, population levels and employment availability stand among the most influential. Other research point out that career opportunity are more likely to have an effect on human capital presence than local amenities and cultural liveliness. Incidentally, human capital refers generally to the knowledge value of individual, usually expressed by education degree and work experience. Now, regarding the attraction and retention factors in smaller centers. First, size of communities matters when it comes to attracting immigrants to Canadian cities and regions. Social networks are also important, along with employment, educational opportunities, and affordable housing. With respect to the main deterrence factors, I will point out the most influential, which are distance from the big cities, and of course the lack of proper settlement services. I would like to focus also on immigrant outcomes. Many research findings demonstrate that immigrants living in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver are doing worse than in the regions at poverty and unemployment, the time to match previous job level, earnings, and human capital recognition, with some obvious structural barriers. Additionally, racialized immigrants are sadly more hit in that picture. At the settlement dispersal policy level, even Citizenship and Immigration Canada recognized in 2001 that the government did not try to influence much the tendencies. Nonetheless, after some pressure on behalf of smaller provinces, the Provincial Nominee program has become the main federal policy response during the last decade. Sorry?
Can I take you back to the previous slide, please?
Yes.
I wish you elaborate more on what you mean by visible minorities in more states and in smaller communities.
Yes. What I mean by this is all of these indicators, for immigrants living in the big cities are worse than living in smaller areas. That's what I got from the literature review. But for visible minorities and racialized immigrants, it's even worse for them. So the factor of being racialized add up to that structure. Is that clear? So if you're racialized, it's even worse. That's what it means. Okay? Thank you. So the Provincial Nominee Program, I was there, has become the main federal policy response during the last decade. Under that program, a province can indicate its interest for specific skilled applicants. These, in turn, can benefit from a fast-track process provided they are willing to first establish themselves in a province. The PNP, as we call it, has given encouraging results over the last decade. For example, 38,000 nominees have been admitted under that stream in 2011. However, the aggregated picture hides disparities. Some evaluations done recently by Dobrovolsky in Nova Scotia critique the overall outcome of this program in the weaker regions, demonstrating that they do not have a net impact on population growth where needed. In fact, numbers show only a 40% retention rate in the Maritimes against 80% in Manitoba and 95% in Alberta and BC. Moreover, the risks regarding these arrangements is to consider and treat immigrants purely as commodities on the labor market and toss aside all other population and social imperatives of regional communities. As I noted in my paper, three major findings are emerging from the analysis. First, immigrants settling in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver do worse than in the regions. This reality shows how the current point system for choosing immigrants and the official narrative to attract them to Canada give candidates the impression that their human capital will be valued once landed, which is obviously not the case. I would qualify this as an unfulfilled promise to newcomers. Second, Size and distance of communities are greater determinants than local amenities regarding attraction and retention of immigrants. With size, we can associate an array of determinants: economics, jobs, education and research institutions, settlement services, and social networks. Additionally, regional communities are being told by economists that they should become more innovative in order to attract human capital, including immigrants. Since remote communities are not fairly equipped to enter this competitive race, especially with the distance factor, most are bound to lose from the start. And this, to follow my metaphor, plays as a second unfulfilled promise on the side of regional communities. Third, success of population renewal outside of the big cities is limited by inadequate immigration and settlement policies. What this literature review shows overall is that the actual pivotal point of our immigration system is almost exclusively macroeconomic. In other words, meant to bring as much skilled immigrants in our system, with the assumption that more available human capital will support a shift in a country's economy towards knowledge-based trends. At the policy relevance level, especially regarding population policy in the smaller areas, regionalization and dispersal programs have not yielded the expected outcomes. As a result, the problem highlighted will remain and become even more acute. So policy-wise, this observation plays as a third unfulfilled promise. Against this, I argue that we need to acknowledge some policy gaps at population renewal, affecting regional sustainability and development, and also at valorizing existing human capital, especially the one trapped in the big cities. What are the options? I have aligned and extended three broad categories inspired by Joseph Garcia of University of Saskatchewan over the impetus of regionalization of immigration. A is the status quo. It is to let the market do and wait for equilibrium to settle naturally, which will obviously be more detrimental to smaller regions. But it's actually what some economists propose. B is to implement marginal adjustments, such as supporting the competitiveness of communities. This option, actually foregoing with the PNP, among others, isn't given much results. Additionally, it shifts the focus from immigrants' responsibility to adapt to Canadian labor market to a focus on communities' lack of competitiveness in explaining their failure at population renewal. And C, we're talking about a real paradigm shift regarding policy vision. A radical aim change should allow a real conversation over policy objectives between immigration, population, and regional development. To conclude, if stakeholders and government can agree on common goals, my proposal is to adopt a multi-level collaborative process in designing new regional development and population policies that will draw on each level's expertise and need. We have to recognize first that this is a complex problem, and we also have to refrain at throwing seemingly easy solution design in policy domain silos. Surely, though, such a vision should be more inclusive than the marketization of individuals and avoid one-size-fits-all solutions regarding implementation of programs. It should entail also putting population policies ahead of labor market ones. Inevitably, to do so, we will have to dare look at some new balanced approach between structure and agency. For example, some new bargain between candidates to immigration and the specific community needs in the regions. Finally, I suggest some research directions in order to feed and support such a shift. One of them, the Australian case of the state-specific visas, has yielded significant results in terms of reversing population decrease in some areas during the last decade. And since this is my first literature review paper, I will gladly welcome your comments to make it better. Thank you very much.